So the NATO summit was supposed to be about unity, but Donald Trump has used the occasion to turn on an ally. But why? Why now? And how? How does he plan to punish this NATO ally? Well, he's threatened to cut off trade. All of it, all in the name of inflicting pain on Spain.
Spain is a wasted cause. We don't want to do any trade business with Spain anymore, by the way. I'd like you to cut it off. Spain is a terrible partner in NATO. They don't participate, they don't pay. I don't want anything to do with Spain. Cut off all trade with Spain, please, including visits. Okay, we don't want anything to do. Watch them come running back. Oh, they'll come running back. They treat this man terribly, and you shouldn't carry him. I mean, you sort of automatically carry because you're protecting an area, so they're there. So they probably figured they have to protect us, right? But we don't have to. We don't have to trade with them. I don't want to do any more trade with them. All right?
Yes,
take it immediately. You don't even talk to them. They're hopeless. Bad people.
Meanwhile, also at the NATO summit, Spain's leader, Pedro Sanchez, told the press his country's relationship with the US couldn't be better, pretty much brushing off the threats, arguing that Spain is part of the EU, which acts as a block on trade disputes. So this isn't really a matter for Spain. Well, Francis Burwell is Managing Director and Head of Research at McLarty, a group advising clients on US-EU relations, currently a Distinguished Fellow with the Atlantic Council's Future Europe Initiative. Spent productive time at Oxford as well, I might add. Francis, great you could potentially spend some productive time with us to talk more about this transatlantic spat. Let's start with the basics. Can Donald Trump halt trade with Spain?
I suppose technically he could. He could try to embargo Spanish goods. The problem is that, well, there are several problems, but one big problem is what happens after he does that.
Right.
And the EU, as a trading bloc, does not distinguish between Spanish goods and other goods from the EU that are going to the United States. I suppose if he tried to embargo goods from Spain, many Spanish goods would just go to France or Italy or Portugal and then come to the United States. But even if he could, if Customs and Border Patrol could identify the goods, the EU is likely to retaliate as a bloc. And not only would that be, the retaliation would be harmful for U.S. interests, but it could very well be the death of the Turnberry Agreement, which is the new U.S.-EU trade agreement, which limits EU tariffs into the United States, U.S. tariffs on the EU goods to 15%, and where the EU has just agreed to reduce tariffs on industrial goods for the United States to zero. So there's quite a high cost. I would also point out that President Trump has previously also singled out Spain, and there was apparently some work done in the U.S. government, and then nothing ever happened in terms of blocking Spanish trade specifically. Finally, we have actually a trade surplus with the Spanish. It's not a big one. It's about $5 billion, but that's different from the EU overall, where we have a significant trade deficit.
Right. So you're laying out a great case for my follow-up question, that Donald Trump has form in that he uses these big events to tear shreds off allies and enemies alike. But why lash out, after all you've just told me, and you make the case beautifully, why lash out again at Spain now?
Well, you know, Donald Trump places a lot of emphasis on personal relationships with other leaders and also on their willingness to flatter him. So I think Pedro Sanchez, he is a socialist, one of the few government leaders in Europe right now who is socialist. And he also has made no bones about criticizing the Trump administration for a variety of things. He has called the Israeli attacks in Gaza genocide. And he has very much criticized the U.S.-Israeli operations in Iran. I think it's also something that, you know, I don't know personally if they get along, but Prime Minister Sanchez has not been reserved in his criticism of Donald Trump.
Yeah. How much stock are you willing to put in that there's something in this about Spain agreeing to buy oil from other countries but not from the US? Does that argument make sense to you?
It could. I think also Spain has become a leading force for renewables within the EU, which is something that the Trump administration does not look on favorably. But in this case, I suspect that really the reason is the criticism that Prime Minister Sanchez has leveled at President Trump and at the decisions that he has made. I think it is also true that as a politician who's been in office for a while, so I think Prime Minister Sanchez has been in power for 7 or 8 years now, he is facing a number of corruption scandals, people close to him, not he personally, people close to him, including his wife, and faces declining favorability ratings in Spain while they're facing an election, and in 27, I believe. And it plays well in Spain. Most Spaniards do not approve of Donald Trump. They do not approve of U.S.-Israeli operations in Iran. And so this plays to the voters, if you will, for the Prime Minister.
There's certainly a lot of the contrast there, particularly most recently on immigration as well, Spain having made legal the living and working agreement with people, more than 1 million living in Spain. I want to, just before I move on, your company advises trade partners. I wonder, has Trump and has the administration learned their lesson on global trade? Do they still see trade as a weapon to beat other countries with? As you're advising partners, are the people you're advising, are they wary of the Trump administration and their effect on international trade?
Well, I think you have to look at the difference between what is said and what is done. And the president says a lot of things. And particularly early in the administration, you did see the impact of that. But because of decisions like the Supreme Court decision on the first batch of tariffs, the so-called IEEPA tariffs, that those were invalid, we're now on a different set of tariffs. And the administration has organized a successor set of tariffs to the current ones because they have a time limit on them. But for Europe, this is now stabilized at about 15% tariffs.
Right.
And I think that most businesses that trade across the Atlantic have kind of figured this out. And what businesses really want is predictability.
Yeah.
So there is anxiousness about what the president might say. There is anxiety about what could be coming down the road that we don't know yet. For example, there was a Section 301 investigation launched on Germany because of prices on pharmaceutical goods 2 weeks ago. So there are things like that that are destabilizing.
Yeah.
But I think that businesses are paying more attention now to not what is said, but the announcements that are coming out of the White House, USTR, the Commerce Department, places.
You've read my mind as to my next question, the thought bubble. I sort of want to get you to bounce off, if possible. It's what is said and what is done, not just from the client point of view, but from the international point of view. So Trump's second term is 534 days old, and making really grandiose threats is an important part of his really unorthodox diplomatic playbook. He has previously, for example, threatened over the Panama Canal that he would take over that country's one of their financial lifelines and a globally significant man-made waterway. He has repeatedly expressed his wish to annex Canada and make it the 51st state. Donald Trump has also threatened military action against Cuba, like he did with Venezuela. My question for our distinguished expert is there a chance that after 534 days of this hyperbolic Trump 2.0 administration that the rest of the world is becoming a little jaded by these threats and more inclined to just let him blow off steam and not react as quickly or as much as they may have earlier in this Trump experience?
Well, I certainly, as a frequent visitor to Brussels and other places in Europe, have noted that where early in the administration you could feel a sense of panic, you now get much more of a sense of, well, let's see if it actually happens. And that's not to say that the rhetoric doesn't have an impact. The president's rhetoric about Greenland has had a very serious impact on relations with Denmark and other European countries. And we saw that again at this summit, at the NATO summit. But I do think that people are much more inclined to look and see if it's going to happen, and to think of some of his statements as his attempt to create bargaining leverage. And then they have to decide how they want to respond in that negotiation. So it is different from what it was in the first 6 months in terms of the impact, but I wouldn't want to dismiss the statements as not having any impact at all, because they certainly do.
That said, you're inclined to think that Spain would be taking that stance on this latest comment at NATO that he wants to cut off all trade with Spain?
Well, I think that the Spanish are probably listening as well to their prime minister, even though he's not very popular, who said that it was overall relations were very positive. I do think that not only in Spain, but across Europe, there is more of a sense of autonomy from the United States. I'm looking at legislation like the proposals like the Industrial Accelerator Act, the new Cloud and AI Development Act, which are clearly aimed at China, but also China's not named, and it is also about keeping risky partners out of your supply chains, or putting limits, making sure you have resilience and duplication in case partners become unreliable. So there is much more of that. And I think you saw it at the NATO summit too, because in the declaration and throughout, including there was a defense forum, a defense industry forum on the sidelines, you saw much more emphasis by the European countries on what they were doing about defense spending, but not just spending, but actually going with a Swedish surveillance plane rather than going back to an American one. So I think there are things like this that are happening more and more in Europe.
Frances, great to talk. Managing Director and Head of Research at McLarty. Great you could spend some time with us to talk more about this transatlantic spat. Thanks so much for your input.
Thanks so much for asking me.
And very much wondering what train of thought you're on for this one. Do you think Donald Trump derangement syndrome is being replaced by fatigue for his constant threats, like his latest against Spain? Drop your thoughts in the comments. From Berlin, it's bye for now.